Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap. I am so excited about this one. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a polling question during today's presentation, so hopefully we can get everybody engaged with that. And then happening at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Cyber Threat Intelligence, Highlights and Trends, Insights and Facts 2020. Our speakers today are Paul Edwards, who is a signature research, development, and delivery in Nokia's Threat Intelligence Lab. Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. Second, we have Gerald Reddick, who is the Director of Product Marketing for Global Security Network Management and SON at Nokia. Gerald, thank you so much for joining me as well. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Good. Excellent. Well, Paul, I know you're kicking us off, and I know you guys have a great presentation, so I'm going to let you get to it. I'll take myself off camera, put myself on mute.
Thank you very much. And yes, this morning here, and I'm joining from Ottawa, Canada, where we woke up this morning to total white, snow-covered ground. Winter is definitely coming. So today, yes, we're here to talk about Nokia's recent threat intelligence report, basic insight and facts about observations that we've made. Sorry, advanced slide. So first of all, let's start with who is Nokia's Threat Intelligence Center. What are we? What's the purpose of this lab, and how do we go about generating such a report? So the Threat Intelligence Lab, or the center, was started roughly 10 years ago. The initial goal was to provide malware detection rules for our NetGuard endpoint security platform that would allow us to identify malware attacks, threats, anything that was happening in a mobile or broadband network associated with Windows, Android, iOS, or any device that would communicate over the internet today. This has evolved over time to include IoT devices and the wealth of attack activity that is out there in the wild today as well. We found early on that in order to do this effectively, the only way to do it properly was to actually start collecting and running the malware itself. And to this day, we're collecting on average about 200,000 unique samples per day in the lab. We're doing both static and dynamic analysis of these malwares, trying to generate command and control activity, peer-to-peer activity, scanning activity, any threat activity that could be associated with these malware for the purpose of building detection rules that will detect these threats in the real world. Our process involves a quality feedback loop as well. The purpose of this is basically we want to publish the highest quality rules possible with very low false positives so that everything detected by our customers is accurate and that they can immediately take actions for. So today we're here to talk about the report. Basically, this is a result of observations based on data from within the lab itself and our extensive malware and traffic libraries, along with aggregated data from our customers, where we're observing over 200 million devices around the world with our NetGuard deployments. This data is based on evidence collected from sensors embedded in carrier-grade networks, and it's reporting on exactly what our rules were written for: malware detection, command and control activity, peer-to-peer activity, scanning activities, exploitation, basically any hacking or anomaly that could happen on the internet, we're detecting, and the report is based on all of these observations. The intent is really to just share insights on the activities that we're seeing with our customers and the security community at large. So today what we're going to talk about is roughly 4 of the main observations within the report. The report has about 8 different observations that we talk about. We're only going to touch on 4 of them today. Those 4 include the impact of IoT in the cybersecurity, smartphones and cybersecurity, and what's the impact on there. What are the top malwares that we're seeing in the wild right now on mobile devices? And as well as what is the impact that COVID-19, the pandemic itself, had on the threat landscape itself. So cybersecurity and IoT, it's kind of a new thing. The idea of putting millions and millions of really small, cheap devices connected to the internet to do many, many different things. It allows us to automate our businesses, our lifestyles, and it gives us the freedom to go anywhere and know what's going on. People think of IoT, they think IP cameras, but that's not really where it's limited to. What we're detecting is they're basically devices like IP routers, wireless routers that connect your home and your businesses to the internet. And it's the wealth of attacks now that are associated with these cheap devices that allow you to connect relatively inexpensively, or to serve us an application on the web relatively inexpensively, that are being exploited. We actually have a breakdown of the activities over the last couple of years, and it demonstrates here just how large impact that IoT devices have had on the overall infection breakdown across all platforms over the last very short period of time. Of course, as usual, our Windows environment remains the most significantly impacted and infected platform in the wild today. I don't expect that to ever change anytime soon, where it's easily the most the highest penetration rate of computing power on the web today. There's on any given year, there's hundreds and hundreds of exploits that are being identified and patched by Microsoft on an ongoing basis. And campaigns like the Emotet and such are always trying to take advantage of those exploits to push their malwares. The Android space, you can see that it has actually shrunk over the last little while, and this is associated to the efforts by the Google of the world and threat researchers who are trying to identify Android malware and reduce the impact that it has before it even gets out into the wild. But IoT is really the key indicator here, and we're seeing a definite trend towards exploiting these devices. Smartphones, as I mentioned, the Android is the most infected device of mobile devices in the wild. It's very simple. It's easily, I think there's 70% of all mobile devices are running the Android operating system. It's a very open environment. People can develop, reverse engineer pretty much anything they want with these devices, and then throw rogue applications out on third-party app stores or pages for people to download. So it's very easy to release your infection, but it's getting much harder to get it into places that are legitimate, like the Google Play Store. top malware on mobile devices. This is a rather significant slide in that you can see that 50% of the malware that we're seeing is actually really, it's really malicious in nature, okay? Your info stealers, your banking Trojans, and your spywares, these all have a very significant ability to steal personal information, to steal money, and whatnot. And so even though the Android infection rate is dropping a little bit, the malware that is out there is very damaging and can easily cause a lot of harm. The lab itself, as we collect our malware, we track the trends, and you can see here that over the years, we have pretty much a linear growth in Android malware that we're seeing, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. So when you look at the fact that infection rates are actually dropping ever so slightly, the threat has never been any more real with the amount of samples that we're actually collecting on a daily basis. Another observation that we've made in the lab as well has to do with malware in general, and that is one of the trickiest things with dealing with malware, first of all, is the fact that we deal with 70, 80 different antivirus engines, all naming and classifying malware in different, using different approaches. But what we've actually seen is a trend towards Trojans, a generalized Trojan activity in terms of malware these days. The thought being that this is efforts of the malware writers to introduce more of a polymorphic method for releasing their malware to try and evade antivirus engines, so that every new piece of malware hitting the road is actually looks ever so slightly different from a binary aspect than the others. The one thing that is significant, though, from Nokia's standpoint and the NetGuard endpoint security, being a network-based detection system, the traffic never really changes for these samples. And so it makes that network-based anomaly detection solution a little more attractive than your typical antivirus activities. Finally, the COVID pandemic. We've actually seen a 2 times increase in our broadband network infection environments. I'm going to skip ahead to a graph. Here we can actually see residential versus mobile infection rates. In the mobile space, my apologies. In the mobile space, you can see in that February-March timeframe where there was a spike of approximately 30% increase in infection rates just as the pandemic was hitting and people were being forced to stay at home. Same thing with the residential space. There's a huge spike when people were being forced to stay at home and work from home in order to spread the infection. We're seeing a huge spike in activity in terms of infections. This can be directly associated to the fact that pretty much every major malware organization jumped on the COVID bandwagon right away, releasing phishing-based attacks through spam and text messages, with basically trying to get potential victims to open up the document, click on the link, your typical phishing attack, but exploiting the fears and concerns of people looking for information about COVID, looking for supplies, preventions, cures, vaccine information, and it goes on and on to this day. These campaigns have not slowed down at all. The phishing attack is probably easily the most effective attack of spreading malware, and it's the easiest one for campaigns to push their agendas as well. And the good news for them is the fact that, well, Thanksgiving, the holiday seasons, the tax season, they're all coming in advance. So you can expect that this will not stop anytime soon, regardless of a pandemic or whatever. So that's roughly a summary of the threat report. It touched on 4 major components. There's additional reading there, so we recommend that you go to the link that'll be provided later for downloading the report and see all of the insight. Right now, we're going to go to a polling question, so I'm going to turn back to Charlene.
All right, great. So the polling question should be up on your screen now. The polling question is, what is, in your opinion, the biggest cyber threat to your business today? You can choose from smartphone infections due to BYOD company policy, keeping the infrastructure up to date against latest threats, or a risk due to more open interfaces for today's business model. While you're going ahead and making your selection, just a quick reminder to the audience that we are taking questions at any time during today's presentation. So you do not have to wait for the question and answer period to submit your question. Please just use your GoToWebinar control panel and just submit your questions right there in that questions tab. All right, we'll give everybody about 5 more seconds, then we'll go ahead and close out the poll and take a look at the results. Counting it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the poll is now closed, and here are the results. The majority of folks said the risk due to more open interfaces for today's business model is their biggest cyber threat to their business, in their opinion. So, gentlemen, does this jive with what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, this is an interesting question in general, and as the question already said, in your business means actually it depends also where the business is, what kind of verticals actually is the enterprise addressing. Is it a mission critical network? Is it more as a service provider looking for consumers, or is it maybe something which looks also in the healthcare industry? So the risk due to more open interfaces, that reflects definitely something that is echoing the deployment of new technologies, cloud native technologies, software as a service. This is something that we see constantly also when it comes to the biggest concern for new technology deployments and then also new services and applications. How to protect all of these open interfaces that are currently connecting, also with the introduction of 5G. So it gives a lot of new opportunities, but also it increased the threat surface. And this is definitely because of the open new interfaces. Paul, anything from your side?
I think you're bang on. It's basically the opening up of the threat surface, and it's large. You now have a bigger target for people to attack, and the amount of interfaces expanding is only making that problem worse.
Yeah, and then the second is keeping the infrastructure up to date against latest threats. I mean, this is something which definitely resonates with all of these hacks and attacks that we have seen. If it is insurance company that we have seen, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, actually, the biggest one in the US. And I mean, this is because of all of these web applications to keep all of these up to date. On the other hand, also we see when we talk with IT security teams or chief information security officers that they see that the convergence of IT and operational technology, it's ongoing, and in many verticals or in many networks infrastructure, it's already one network. So OT and OT is not anymore that we can separate this. So even more important also to keep all of these network elements, all of the databases, all of these firmwares up to date all the time with all of the security patches to protect the services, the performance of the network, the entire infrastructure.
Excellent. Well, I'll go ahead and close out this poll and let you guys get back to your presentation if you're ready for me to.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, great.
Okay, go. I think there's. We have to go back to the presentation mode.
Sorry.
There you go.
All right, and with the next slide, if you can click, Paul. Yeah, let's. The second half actually of this webinar, I would like to go with you through a journey where we look into what kind of cyber attacks, what kind of cyber criminals, tactics, and methods. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Is when we go into deployment of IoT or industrial IoT, or even also a combination of 5G and new services, which could be, for example, industrial IoT. So, I mean, we are in 2020, and IoT is no longer in just a linked sensored object, right? It has evolved from a simple device that captures data and something that connects the physical and the digital world. Today, IoT devices are small, cheap, they are robust, and they are everywhere. It's a deploy and connect method actually that we see. And according to some reports, and especially I would refer to Statista, there will be in 2025 74 billion connected devices. So, I mean, this is an unparalleled growth of connected IoT devices, and it's driven by emergence of 5G networks. So, but let's look into the next slide. Yeah, so 5G user scenarios are evolving, and this new user scenarios are always introduce new security challenges. And but let's go through these three phases that we see right now in the industry. So the first is the IoT itself. So 5G networks are promising not only to this increased data rates, but also the low latency data communication for this time sensitive IoT application. So 5G will also enable connectivity of this massive number of IoT devices, and all of this lead to more IoT applications. And here it's not anymore that the IoT is acting just as a sensor, but increasingly interact also with the real world. And that brings me to the second phase where we see the M2M, the machine to machine. So it's an ubiquitous connectivity, and it requires also a guaranteed quality of service in 5G, because that will then allow also a development of this machine-to-machine communication, and all of these connected devices communicate then between themselves with one centralized site that constantly monitors and controls the operations. The third part is the real-time applications. And here it goes then from the critical infrastructure to the autonomous vehicle infrastructure. And 5G then will allow also this new type of application that will not that was not possible before, because right now we are addressing all of these latency issues and the resiliency issues that are high enough with 5G but wasn't with 3 or 4G. So in general, we can say, yes, 5G promised to offer great capacity, reduced latency, and all of this speed. And we think right now in gigabits per second and not anymore in megabytes. So critical infrastructure, transport system, but also IoT-enabled smart homes, smart cities are bound to run on top of the 5G infrastructure. So that's something here we set the scene with this kind of common understanding. But let's look into the next slide, because here we see actually also the drawback, and this brings us also back to the response that you have given in the polling question. So industrial IoT attack surface. So 5G connectivity in factories definitely will change the very nature of the production line. This is clear, right? So because it brings the automation, it brings also, as we see in the background image, the robotization, it will simplify our processes. It will boost enormously the efficiency, and that will also prevent people from having to perform some dangerous task, right? And robots will then also become mobile and controlled remotely. And that's something which is completely different to what we see today when we see some robots in production or assembly lines. It is much more, the processing happens right now than in the multi-axis edge computing. Means the MEC, the multi-axis edge cloud. So all of these intelligence sits in the cloud and controls, monitors, and gives the command to the robot itself. And all that to reduce the time that is required to reconfigure also the production environment, right? And but to seize that market, enterprises need also to be able then to build the trust and to secure all of this business continuity. Finally, we can say that they have to keep the industrial IoT devices protected from attacks. But how can they do it? So as we see in this slide, there's a very large attack surface, means actually methods where threats may get in with all of this massive volume of endpoints that we see. It means a lot of opportunities for cyber criminals, right? Then we have also lack of security best practices for IoT manufacturers itself, right? Means they're lacking for security in coding and hardening and the configuration. Finally, also the patch management, right? To keep the device up to date all the time. And then we see also here a wide variety of protocols. Means all of these protocols means also an additional risk of vulnerabilities. So there's a need actually to think different. And when we look into the next slide, we will see a new approach to manage the risk. And only this can be done with a layered defense in depth method. So nearly 1/3 of the incident response time today is spent on very manual processes. And that cannot scale up. If we look into 5G and all of these services beyond, even also all of the sensitive data that are connected to this application and services. So transforming security operations into a set of predefined automated responses will allow the companies to tackle all of these recurring attacks quickly and also to reduce the growing workload that security teams facing these days. So the end goal is actually to automate, or let's say semi-automate security operations. And all of this, as we see here in the slide, enriched with ML, with machine learning and data analytics. So moving then actually from a model in where we see machine assist humans to a model which humans assist machines with all of this intelligent and programmable software. So in the next slide, we see how Nokia actually react on these challenges and even also pain points that we constantly hear from our customers about a new introduction and the concerns of services, IoT deployments, or industrial IoT deployments to bring an appropriate security level into 5G and the connected services and applications. And that requires a complete new security approach. So what we designed is an architecture that allows an holistic approach to security and covers the entire network lifecycle. Means providing solutions also to protect 5G end to end. Means from, as we see, from the device to the access side, to the edge side, to the central side. So the architecture itself can not only protect the network and all of these associated services, but also it can anticipate emerging attack vectors to evolve and to address these future vulnerabilities. And that's key actually to prevent additional attacks or attack surfaces. So, and the solution actually that you see here in a very simplified image is upon a triangle of trust. And Nokia's triangle of trust actually has this, for sure, 3 corners or 3 pillars. The first is to understand the inside. The inside means actually that the company itself must have or especially the head of the security team, must have a clear understanding of its current security capabilities. And when they have an understanding of the security capabilities and the security posture that is needed also to meet the 5G requirements, then he has a clear picture of what the gap is in between and what the roadmap means actually with all of these intermediate steps to increase the security posture. So, and such kind of insight comes with an analysis to provide a complete view of the current security posture, which covers the security controls, all of these tools and methods that are already implemented in the security architecture, but also looking into the staff skills of the security team itself, sitting in the security operations center, plus all of these applied security technologies. So coming from the insight to the scale, this is the second pillar. That result from the insight assessment will allow them in the scalable part to estimate the investment that is needed. When I know actually what my current security situation is, my capabilities, and what it should have to address all of these new services running on industrial IoT or 5G, then I have a clear estimate of investment actually that is needed. And that could go, for example, it could be that the organization has a very comprehensive security, means all of the controls are well documented and implemented, and they have regulatory audits. So this organization may need just to invest to strengthen the identified weak areas, all of these maybe tiny gaps that I identified, but it could be also that the company actually realized that after this overall assessment, the result is quite poor, and it would mean a huge capital expenditure to bring them up to a security posture, security level actually that fits all of the 5G requirements. So it could be also the decision is to outsource the security operation and to an expert who is able then also to manage the security with all of this appropriate scalability. And here from the inside, the scalable, it brings us to the last point of the triangle, means the adaptiveness. So that includes all of the software functions at the heart of the trusted 5G network, means all of these security tools, all of these software components that are equipped and enriched with ML automation and cognitive analytics. So it's an integrated and orchestrated automated workflow. So, and this workflow then enables a very efficient and very effective cybersecurity lifecycle. And this cybersecurity lifecycle means to cover the prediction, the prevention, then the detection, and the response action. All right. Going to the next slide and nail down a little bit what that means actually for our particular robot arm that we have seen in a previous background image. So to prevent the robotic arm from being compromised, security operations teams will rely on a very modern software module, right? So to keep both the cost of breach under control and also to prevent against some cybersecurity hacks. So here what you see is the Nokia security software suite, which is called NetGuard Adaptive Security Operations. And the NetGuard solution goes beyond the traditional SOAR solutions that we see from multiple vendors in the industry, because it includes the big data ingestion, and it has analytics in the platform and in one platform. So it provides this so-called single pane of glass view in a way that it is able with a library of interfaces to provide a multi-vendor capability to ingest constantly data and log alarms from different security tools, from multi-vendor security tools, to interpret these different logs and alarms for potential threats and to provide recommended actions. So it augments the security team to almost eliminate the decision-making time, means the time between the detection of a threat and the execution of the response, the mitigation phase. But let me introduce all of these software modules in a nutshell. We see here with the white background the so-called SOAR platform, and our SOAR platform includes not just the automation but also the analytics, as I mentioned. So it's able to quickly identify the threat and then automatically triages the security events. So it is actually the command and control portal with all of these capabilities also to produce reporting for CISO teams to report back into the executive board, and it reduces the entire workload of the security operation team. So and that connects then what we see on the right hand side with this what we call digital trust modules. So the first is the identity and access, or identity and privileged access management software. So it requires actually that whenever or let's go back actually to the answer that we have seen of our polling question, that the majority of you said because of these open interfaces, there's this highest potential of risk actually in my business model. And the reason is because there's a need actually also to change the weapon in a security team to an appropriate identity and access management tool, to understand who is accessing my network, when he is accessing my network, and for what purpose he is accessing my network. And then also to define different kind of roles, which kind of group is accessing my network, for what purpose, and then to distinguish between different privilege level. And that's something which is key in a 5G world, where we have a more open infrastructure, where partners, customers, third parties are constantly connecting into my infrastructure. For example, to look into various network elements, base stations, for example. And these base stations then should be only accessible for this particular group, so that they are not able to connecting your core network or your database or your crown jewels actually that have financial data or user data or whatever. The second is the audit compliance management. So this module extracts and analyzes the parameter and settings then from connected devices in real time, and then compares the result against an industry standard. So what we call the golden standard configuration. So doing so, it allows the security operation team to detect and to respond immediately to any deviation or any change made to the system configuration. For instance, the system configuration of the robotic arm in the multi-access edge cloud. And the next is the cognitive endpoint security. This is ultra important because while any security system can detect known attack signature, a smarter approach is actually to have also the capability to detect unknown zero-day attacks that have never been seen by any security analyst before. So endpoint security with a cognitive threat detection uses also machine learning and artificial intelligence to differentiate between the normal and abnormal traffic from the endpoint device. Finally, even also in a world of IoT, very important is the certificate lifecycle management, because certificates that allow and authenticate IoT devices or any network elements to connect to my core network, for example, has to have a lifecycle management, and ideally an automated lifecycle management. So with all of these renewing and revoking of certificates, this is something that need to be streamlined and automated. So finally, the entire solution that we call as Nokia NetGuard Adaptive Security Operation is based on all of these introduced optional and also standalone capable software modules that we have seen. And here again, it's worth to say again, this is an multi-technology and multi-vendor capable software solution. So it identifies then all of these malicious attackers, including the potential insider threats, by analyzing user and machine behavior, and then also automatically indicating the level of the threat. So that's something which is completely new, and this is something where it frees up the manual time and the manual response time actually that we currently see in security operation teams. All right, with the next slide, I want to give you here again some KPIs. So again, we say all the time, nearly 1/3 of the incident response time today is spent on manual processes, and that's something really that we have to avoid, because whenever security operations teams has to manage SCADA or telco architecture or mission critical architecture, and often we see also the security talents are often understaffed in security operations teams. So it has to consider that we look into these trust items, the insight, the scalability, and the adaptability, because that's the foundation to bring up the proper security strategy, the tools, all of these methods for 5G and IoT, based on these modern tools that I introduced, but also the assessment processes of people and tools. And then finally, we can say it supports the SOC team, the security operation team, to shrink the detection time. And we see here clear examples from our deployments at our customer side by up to 80%. Also to cut the investigation time, the decision-making time by up to 50% with cognitive analytics that helps also to understand which kind of alarms and logs are actually connected to each other and define a potential threat, or is it maybe a false positive? And then finally, also to accelerate the recovery time. So the execution, the mitigation time, and this by up to 75%. All right, so with this, actually, let's spend also the remaining time to answer all of the incoming questions. Let's see. I see here some feedback.
We've gotten some questions in so far. Joe, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, clear and loud,
Okay.
Charlene.
All right. Excellent. Let's see. We have gotten a couple questions in so far. So let's go ahead and put a real quick reminder to the audience. If you do have a question, go ahead and use the GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. All right, here is the first one for you. Paul, this one I believe is for you. What is the most important threat section that operators should consider?
Well, in reality, all sectors in security are important and should be taken seriously. Operators should be looking at really a multi-layered approach to protecting their businesses, their networks, and their customers. It starts with things like, managing infrastructures with tools for automating device management, updates, and to ensure, that you're auditing properly to know where your weaknesses in your networks are. Understanding, controls and access measures for all your infrastructure. And of course, things like educating users on current threats. It goes from phishing to any threat that's out there in the wild today. We always have new employees coming in. They may not have been exposed to these things before, so the education phase is a very, very important aspect. And then as well as knowing what's going on in your network. So anomaly detection within a network and the ability to channel the data that you collect to actually be productive resource so that you can protect your businesses and to protect your customers.
Excellent. All right, great. Let's see. Question here. Let's see. Gerald, I think this one is for you. COVID-19 seems to have triggered a spike in cybercrime. In your assessment, how serious is the threat?
So actually what we can say, yes, from our observation, the threat is quite serious. Even also when you look into our threat intelligence report, which is available on one of the resource links here, you will see that between February and March, we have seen an increase of 30% of cyber attacks. And those kind of cyber attacks were quite ugly, honestly, because they use actually all of this fear that people had during the COVID-19 during the pandemic time, actually, where we still are, and for instance, to mirroring the John Hopkins page, and with that actually to start a huge scam to bring people with this phishing attack to a particular site where they have stolen with keylogger applications, credit card numbers, personal information from your computer. So things actually that you should constantly protect. And when I'm saying phishing attacks, I mean this is an ever-evolving threat that we see in the industry, and this is probably also the easiest entry point for cyber criminals with all of these social media and social applications that we constantly use to start a so-called social engineering attack, and then looking for some particular options to find the user credentials to access into your computer, in your personal computer, for consumers, for example, you and me, for example, or even more serious, to find access into some mission critical infrastructure, and then also to find the crown jewels to exfiltrate the data for the black market, or to bring the entire system down. And we have seen some serious attacks recently, especially also when it comes to how cyber criminals use this new technologies that I mentioned, means machine learning, analytics, and automation. So it's not just for the defense side. It's also that all of these black hat attackers using this kind of technologies. And so it's a huge benefit for them actually that they are pretty well connected in the black market, using this kind of technology to bring, for instance, an IoT botnet army to bring some technologies or services down, as we have seen with the first IoT botnet attack in 2016. That was the so-called mirror attack, and that continues. I mean, it started with 2016, and there's a variety of mirror malware samples out in the industry. So it's even more important whenever we deploy new services and new technologies. So all of this that we discussed here, software as a service, cloud native environments, to have an appropriate security cannot be an afterthought.
All right, great. Plenty of time for questions, guys. I think we have about 10 minutes or so. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit it. Here's a question actually that just came in. Have you been monitoring pre-election malware and ransomware as well as you are tracking today's election?
I'm not tracking the election yet because it's still early for me, but yes, we track every piece of malware.
Quite topical.
As I mentioned before, we're seeing over 200,000 unique malware samples on any given day. We're in the lab. We're tracking every research item that security people are blogging about. And so there isn't really much that we haven't seen. It really goes back to like the COVID phishing scam. Your malware organizations are going to jump on any bandwagon that's available to them to release their malware, to push their agenda, to get you infected. And so those things, they're never ending. Have we seen a specific campaign around it? Only small things, nothing significant, but it would not surprise us if something strange happens today, that they'll be very quick to respond.
All right, great. Let's see. Here's a question for you, Paul. Have the threat actors changed their techniques to produce malware with time?
Well, tactics are always evolving. But I mean, they always have a single principle in mind, and that's that somebody somewhere is trying to gain access to your restricted resources, right? For some purpose, like stealing personal information, business, your IP, your customer data, or your money for that matter, or to cause some kind of service interruption or other, nefarious activity. It always tends to start with the low-hanging fruit. So your phishing emails, your text message campaigns. I mean, COVID-19 is a perfect example of this, and the spike that they can actually induce in the infection rates. They're direct results of these campaigns. As I mentioned before, the holiday season's coming, so these will never stop. The phishing is ultimately the most effective campaign. And malware being released, I mean, we're talking banking Trojans, Bitcoin mining tools, ransomware. There's been huge ransoms being paid lately. So cyber criminals always have a potential revenue stream. And I don't see that ever changing. They're always going to find some way of pushing their agenda of stealing. Information stealers actually is one of the key indicators. There's been more and more of them lately where you're seeing Android malware that really doesn't do much when you run dynamic analysis, but it's sending all of your personal information off to command and controls. And they're basically harvesting this information, and it's a resource that they can draw from at any given time. And this is becoming more impactful now that we're seeing, infected IoT devices that are being merged into botnets, essentially, like the original Mirai botnet. Now, the original Mirai botnet just tried to spread by doing telnet and SSH scanning and stuff like that. But now what we're actually seeing is these botnets have an arsenal of attacks for unpatched internet-facing devices, in order to basically push their infections out, grow their botnets, but also identify holes in your networks that then they can later take advantage of. A simple hole in your network means somebody now has access to your home, to your business, and with a little lateral movement, with the tools that are available to attackers these days, one little infection can turn into an entire business takedown very quickly.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, we've actually gotten a couple questions in regarding 5G security, so I'm going to kind of bundle them together and then we can kind of take it the way it goes. So first of all, what are the key requirements for a new 5G security landscape? And then related to that, excuse me, how will security be in IoT 5G networks that are used in mobile health or e-health?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, we have to distinguish between the different verticals. As I mentioned at the beginning, so it could be an energy grid, for example. It could be also healthcare. And we see here right now the question about mobile health or e-health and how it links actually to the particular 5G security levels. And this is something which is completely new also in 5G, that we have the opportunity in a 5G network to cut the network into different slices. So different slices means that actually we have different services that we can define with different security levels. So for example, when we look into the mobile health or e-health application, which includes all of the sensitive data and from the patient, for instance, itself, it's something that requires the highest level of security. And that means actually also to cut the security into different slices and provide this to different kind of clients, customer groups, so that those are actually also have the opportunity to define the different performance, but also security levels on their own. And that's especially important also for the healthcare industry. And so when we look into the question about what are the key attributes, the key pillars for 5G security, we see 4 important key requirements. So the first is, and this is something where what is maybe also addressed with more part of the presentation, is the adaptability, the adaptation part. So that gives the company the ability also to respond quickly to all of these cyber attacks that are much more sophisticated in their techniques, as we heard also from Paul, than they were yesterday with all of these randomized attacks. So today we see a bit more focus on IoT devices and then smartphones, but the laser focus for cyber criminals is for sophisticated and targeted attacks. That means we talk these days more about advanced persistent threats than randomized attacks, where cyber criminals start with a widespread of phishing email attack to thousands or millions of email accounts. More finally look into some particular industries or enterprises and focusing on these enterprises to steal the crown jewels of this enterprise. So that requires adaptation. The second is the speed. We talked about this, to early detect in a cyber kill chain the cyber criminal, to reduce the time where he's undetected in the network. So what we call dwell time. The third is the integration. So integration means to have security implemented with the opportunity for the security operation team, the talents, to have a single pane of glass view, to have a library of interfaces that connects the variety of security tools and provide them with a more cohesive and holistic view of all of these different security alarms and log data that coming from different SIM tools or secure endpoint security tools or firewalls that protect in cloud and so on. So after the integration, the fourth is the automation part. So automation, and here in my part, I talked about this, to bring automation as the key to reduce all of this manual driven work that cybersecurity teams have today, to investigate fast, but also to respond and to start the mitigation process in a very fast and automated way, to reduce the response time, and then also to much more focus on the threat and to eliminate or quarantine the threat immediately in your network.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we are actually about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so we're going to have to close out the question and answer period. If we did not get to your question, I think we got to all of them, but if we didn't, I apologize. But please know that the folks at Nokia will be getting a copy of all of the questions that came in, and I'm sure somebody from the organization will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. Also want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, I did mention at the top of the hour we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and do that now? Let's see, our first winner today is Christian K. That's Christian with a K and then a K. Congratulations, Christian. Next winner today is Ray D. Congratulations, Ray. Third winner today is Roy W. Congratulations, Roy. And our final winner today is Carolyn C. Congratulations, Carolyn. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline by email to get your gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Easy for me to say. All right, Paul, Gerald, thank you so much for your time today. I love seeing all these great statistics and lots of really, really fascinating information in today's webinar, and a lot of good takeaways for organizations as well. So thank you again for your time, for your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.